With the three next paintings we're going to look at, there are issues of censorship coming in, as well as looking at why they were found to be obscene. I've given you some background for each of them. And this first one, notice from 92, so we're 20 years into Miller, so we kind of have an idea of exactly what's going to be found to be obscene, offensive. Obviously, with the name, it is meant to be provocative with sex laws and coat hangers, so you see right away that it's going to be an issue surrounding abortion. And so, again, looking at this, it doesn't matter what your opinion is on abortion, we can still look at the issue surrounding it, how we're going to handle this. So, I tell you that Claudio applied for, he received a permit to exhibit the painting in a federal building. So, we have the federal government coming into play in North Carolina. He had received some public funding and then had applied and received permission after submitting information on what the painting would be, how explicit it is, etc., name and all. And once it was there and they saw the actual work, they decided to remove it because it would offend a very conservative senator at the time, Jesse Helms. So I tell you that Claudio sued. The U.S. District Court ruled that despite the purposes of the cooperative program, the government could prohibit the display of such a gory and graphic painting. So in this case, censorship won out. Why? Okay, so let's go through the Miller test, because this is what the court would have done. They would have looked at, one, is this painting, does it appeal to the prurient interest? Is it patently offensive? And does it have redeeming value? And so we know right away the court had a problem with one of those and said no, so that it could be censored and taken out of the federal building. In other words, it didn't violate his constitutional right to free expression. And that was what one of the issues would have been, is when he was given the money and put it into the federal building, was his constitutional right to free speech taken away. So if we look at this, does it appeal to the prurient interest? Not really. This is not meant to be a sexual scene, although we have a nude woman, we have the American flag, and then we have different images of either nude bodies or a fetus at the bottom. So is it patently offensive? And right there is where it's going to hit the problem, because abortion is such a controversial subject, as I said. It is a political subject, that the painting would politicize the issue immediately. So this is where a problem lies with this one, and again, and that's what you would say in a discussion, that it's patently offensive because of the subject matter. Abortion is a controversial subject. Whether obviously this was meant to be a pro-choice idea and painting. The reason being is that some of the laws that prohibit abortion in different countries would result in women performing self-abortions with coat hangers. So that's the point of this. So it is meant to politicize the issue, put across a political point of view, and that would make it patently offensive, specifically because of the fetus, and then once you see that, it brings in the whole issue of abortion much more clearly to people. So this one was allowed to be taken down, found to be obscene, because of the message that is being put forth. And the second one, we have a sculpture that was placed on Washington University in Topeka, Kansas. And as I tell you that each year there's different sculptures that are put up to see which ones would be displayed around the campus. This one, which is called Holier Than Thou, was selected to be one. A professor and a student filed suit to have it removed because they say it conveyed an impermissible state-sponsored message of disapproval of the Catholic religion. In other words, there was a Catholic professor, a Catholic student, who found this inappropriate and obscene toward their religion, and so they wanted to have it removed. The courts said no. Why? Because this kind of cuts at two different issues. The obscenity issue is this appealing to the prurient interest. No, there's nothing sexualized about this at all. Is it patently offensive? So that's where we can get into the issue. Is this patently offensive? The issue that came up in this legal case is that those who sued weren't really putting it as an obscenity issue. They were saying this is showing a state sponsored religion. In other words, a state sponsored disapproval of the Catholic religion. And so it's easy to show, as this court did, that it's obvious the university is not publicizing this and saying this is the university's message we're putting out there. This is a student sponsored or a school sponsored student award for those who do the best design in a particular year. And it was one of five. So obviously this is not a political statement by the actual college. But as far as a obscenity issue, prurient interest, absolutely not. Patently offensive, that is where you would say, well, the way that the cardinal is portrayed, the fact that he's seen as kind of a grotesque image of what a man should look like. He looks old. He kind of looks a little bit, I don't know, to me, I guess I read a little bit of something inappropriate, smarmy in his look. And he's really meant to kind of be a dirty old man. Obviously, 2003, we started having the church scandal coming out. So this obviously was a political message as well. But because they didn't sue under the appropriate theme, in other words, they didn't go after obscenity and it being patently offensive, they went after the religious issue, it was easier to dismiss. Would this have redeeming value? Then you can say the fact that student produced, it's university student production, then possibly it has value for that reason. It has value as a piece of art, the work that was put into it by the student, sculptor, etc. Um, Final one, Chris O'Feely's Holy Virgin Mary. Some of you are a little bit older, you may remember the scandal of 1986 where an African artist used some African ideas to create a Virgin Mary. First of all, when you see this, a couple of things pop out. One, we now have an African Virgin Mary, and that's the biggest thing. Normally, the Virgin Mary is seen as kind of a certain age, svelte, white. So this kind of goes complete opposite direction. She definitely has African features. She's a much more voluptuous woman. And so this causes some issues right away because we now have a new representation of what the Virgin Mary looks like. But then once you start reading and you see that he's used dried elephant dung, which is normally a sacramental element in African rituals. So often in African art, they use this. But Mayor Giuliani, the mayor at the time in New York, when he saw this and he heard the controversy, said this was an affront to the Catholic faith. And so he, as mayor, froze all funds to the museum and said, until you take it down, you're not going to get any more money. And so the art museum, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, took Giuliani to court and said, there's nothing offensive about this, there's nothing obscene, and you using freezing funds is just basically blackmail against us. And the courts agreed that when you look at this, there's nothing in the prurient interest, there's nothing sexualized about this. Patently offensive. Well, if a purely American artist were to just take cow dung and start making it, possibly that would be a political image or a political issue. But here, this is something that is often seen in African art. So he's using something that African artists wouldn't typically use. So there's nothing patently offensive in that. Is it patently offensive to show the Virgin Mary other than a tall, thin, white woman of a certain age? Not really. People can have different views of the Virgin Mary. And is there redeeming value to this? Um, Again, with newer artists, it's often hard to say that yes, there's going to be the redeeming value. But for this one, what is the redeeming value? Showing young Africans, African Americans, that Jesus, Virgin Mary doesn't have to look in the way that the European world has made them out to be. Um, So, giving a little bit different view of the Christian faith, that doesn't necessarily make it not art. So, the court found against Giuliani, said they had to allow this to be on display because there's nothing obscene about